Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you all are having a great Sunday. It's time to talk about The Mandalorian. Yes, the Star Wars TV series that is now streaming on Disney+. Before I go any further, those of you who are surely typing into the comments section what a horrible hypocrite I happen to be, of course I'm a hypocrite, but I actually did not pay for Disney+. It comes free with my phone plan somehow. So I figured, why not watch the show that everybody's asking me to analyze and give you a thorough breakdown of what's happening in it, as well as my opinions on it. So don't crucify me too quickly for that. I'm sure you can find other things to crucify me for. Let's get into the analysis. Before I go too much further, let me also point out some basic things about the series. If you haven't watched it yet, it takes place after Return of the Jedi. I think lots of fans are hoping this series will somehow explain where the First Order came from, all the crap that just happened, I guess, between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. I think a lot of people are hoping to have some gaps filled in because the gaps were pretty big and there wasn't a whole lot of backfill for what the heck happened in that 20 or 30 year gap between Episode 6 and Episode 7. We don't get it in the first episode. The first episode is primarily just a pretty shallow exposition of the titular character, the Mandalorian. And I'd like to break down exactly how this was executed by Jon Favreau. If I'm saying his name wrong, I apologize. I've never heard it spoken aloud, so I will just say it as best I can. But Jon Favreau's his interpretation of this character he created called the Mandalorian, kind of based on Boba Fett. I think people are very interested in it because it aesthetically looks like Boba Fett and Jango Fett. He is a Mandalorian. Mandalorians have some very interesting place in the kind of extended universe lore. And so that's where he's going with this one. So let's break down the story into a couple of different parts to explain exactly what's going on. So there's 4 quarters to the episode, and each of these serves a different function. So the introduction, the first quarter of it, it's a little bit long. It's about 10 minutes to do this. All it really shows is the Mandalorian coming into a cantina, into a pub, having a bar fight with people who pick a fight with him, and then acquiring a rather cowardly person who has a bounty on him. Then that person I'm going to give spoilers for this episode, by the way, so if you don't want spoilers, I guess you can go watch it. But if you don't care about spoilers, there's really not that much revealed in this first episode, just so you know. Because this basic setup here at the beginning, you know how it's going to go. Like he walks into the cantina, some dudes pick a fight with him. Now, before they pick a fight with him, they're of course tormenting this blue-faced guy that ends up being the bounty target. So right away, what John is showing you is the Mandalorian is actually a heroic character. People are saying, "Oh, he's like this movie, this show's a lot like a Western," and it kind of is. But it's not showing him as a nihilistic, gun for hire with no morals, because of the construction of the scene. And then we kind of fractally get this repeated for the rest of the episode, as I'll explain. So he actually saves this kind of blue-faced fish guy from these big, bad, evil tormentors, big hairy dude and an ugly tentacle-faced alien. And so the Mandalorian, I think, beats up one, and then it manages to have a door, one of these like iris doors, chop one of them in half. And so it shows him being a badass, but he's being a badass in a way that actually stops something bad from happening to somebody else. And that signals to you that he's actually not a morally gray character. He's a morally good character, as we'll get into this. He might be like, I don't know, if you guys think of D&D stuff, it might be like chaotic good or something like that. So he acquires this blue-faced guy who's very kind of neurotic, and then they go up into his ship, and there's some scenes of him and his ship. Then he lets the neurotic guy downstairs into his ship, and the neurotic guy finds his weapons but won't shoot them. Don't know why. Don't know what he's doing there. Seems like a weird choice to have a prisoner go down there and fake having to use the bathroom. That's why he has to go down. And then to not, pick up a weapon and shoot his captor. And then he gets frozen in carbonite. I guess there's a carbonite freezer just in the bottom of the Mandalorian's spaceship. So that's the first quarter. It's just an exposition of his character, showing him being a badass and doing what he does, which is acquire a bounty. And it shows a couple of the items he uses to do that. So the very first shot, he holds up this, they call it a fob, and it tracks the person you're trying to catch, I guess. And then he pulls out a puck, they call it a puck, and it shows a little hologram of the person he's trying to catch, who he then escorts off, freezes in carbonite, and delivers to somebody who works for the guild. So all of that is just to show the setup of what's going on there. The second quarter is really just a lot more exposition of random things. You have a setup of what is the actual plot goal for the episode, which is to acquire another target. And because the setup of the first episode is to just acquire another target, you kind of have to wonder what the purpose of that first opening scene is. And I believe the purpose is to show him being a real badass, because later in it we show him being maybe not as badass. So that's why we have that opening scene there. It's actually probably a pretty decent choice. Great way to get people hooked on the show. So he gets the setup. He goes and meets some ex-Imperial guys. They give him this special steel, and that's the down payment, and then tell him that he has to go acquire this target. They won't tell him anything about it other than the target's 50 years old. So why they won't tell him more about that, I'm not sure, but that's what they won't. They just won't tell him that. And so that's the setup for the main goal. Then we have a scene that's there to serve as exposition for the Mandalorians as a tribe. And it gives you a bunch of clues that you can piece together to figure out how the Mandalorians work. So he comes in, brings in this steel. This person, I guess maybe who's like a higher rank than him and has a gold mask, she makes a pauldron for him out of this steel, like a little piece of armor to cover his shoulder, out of this special steel. And in fact, in the very first scene, there's a character who comments, it starts with a B, I don't remember the name, it's like, that Barak steel? Because his helmet's made out of it. So she makes a pauldron out of it for him. And then they have a little bit of discussion about foundlings, right? The excess will pay for many foundlings. Then he has a flashback of some tragedy when he's a child, like his parents getting killed. And we kind of infer from that the Mandalorians took him in and made him the warrior that he is after finding him as some sort of orphaned child. And that really encapsulates how the Mandalorians work at this point in the franchise. The Mandalorians, rather than being a race of people at this point, are a multi-species or multiracial organization that takes in people and trains them in their culture. So we get an exposition of that. Then finally we get onto the third quarter of the story, which is where he goes to this alien planet looking for his target and almost gets killed by these weird big mouth guys that look like they're from Morrowind, or look like they're from Elder Scrolls Online. So they try to bite his arm off, and he gets saved by another alien. And then you spend a couple minutes getting ready to go fight the target, and then the last quarter is just fighting a bunch of dudes, big Wild Bunch style shootout, concluding with finding the target. And at the end of that, we have a save the cat moment. So the entire setup of this episode is to provide exposition and to really show the character's moral quality. And that's what happens in the last scene. So this is a spoiler, but they find a little baby Yoda creature. And in that last scene, he teams up with an assassination droid, a bounty hunter droid, and they kill everyone in the camp. And then they break down the door and they find the baby, and the droid wants to kill the baby, and the Mandalorian kills the droid. Now, that's a moral action. It's a save the cat moment, right? And the robot was going to kick the dog, if you will. So the robot was going to do something evil. He prevents the evil from happening by shooting the robot. Now, of course, he was asked to bring in the target alive, but if they have to terminate the target, that was okay. That was part of the agreement. But he shoots the droid, and we don't feel bad about him shooting the droid because droids are robots, and they don't really have personality. Unless you're watching Rogue One, in which case the droid has a lot of personality. In fact, actually, I think throughout Star Wars, droids have some of the best personalities, and you would feel the worst about them being destroyed. But this one doesn't really have a personality. It's not really human. So there's no kind of moral conflict over him just killing the droid and saving the baby. The entire set appears to show how moral he is. Now, let me give you some of my opinions on what's going on. So this does not convert me to liking TV shows. It's far too decompressed for what's here. To give you an example of what's in it, this would be maybe the first, this entire story could be told in the first 15 pages of a manga, right? I would write this story in like 2,000 words, and then it's stretched out to almost 40 minutes. So it feels really slow paced. It feels kind of boring. The entire episode is filled with shots of the actor walking very stiffly in his armor, with nothing else there. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's kind of like a Western like that. Yeah, there's some issues with that. So let me break down some of the categories after I've explained what's happened with the story and how this story was executed and why I think as far as TV goes. So let me go, before I start like saying a lot of negative things, it would be unfair to compare this to Star Wars movies because it's not a movie, it's TV. You have to compare it to other TV shows. And I think comparing it to other TV shows, it's actually okay. If I'm trying to compare it to Star Wars movies, then obviously it's not going to live up to my standards, but it's not. It's in a different format. And so you really do have to think about it a little bit differently. If we start with like visual design and aesthetics, they're very good. They're actually really excellent for a TV show. It's really some very high quality, high production sets, high quality, high production costumes, puppetry, things like that. There's a couple of good standout ones. There's the alien at the beginning, who looks kind of like that. He looks pretty cool. There's the blue-faced alien in makeup. Looks like Star Trek quality makeup, which is good makeup. And then there's, the costumes that the Mandalorians wear, which look good. The kind of roughed up stormtroopers have a cool look to them. And in general, I think the visual design works. The aliens were good. The alien that he meets, who basically has a puppet face, looks actually really good. Looks really good. Very, very well executed. So the visual design, I think, is really top notch. It's mostly OT aesthetics, but it's also just a general sci-fi setting. So if you were to compare this to Star Wars, or you're going to make it like it's a sci-fi show, I think I'd have a different opinion. I think I'd like it more if it was just generic sci-fi, if I didn't know it was Star Wars. But because I know it's Star Wars, I tend to view it through a little bit different lens. That's just probably going to come with the territory. So the aesthetics are really good. Very, very top tier for a TV show. Now I'm going to say some negative things about the technical way that they executed that, though, because I do not like the cinematography in this show. The photography, it really was almost nauseating. There was lots of hand cams where like things were just kind of moving around. Like not even, I mean, it might have been Steadicam stuff, but like the frame was just moving around constantly, or showing like part of his armor, like weird angles, too close. The lighting was high contrast and very dark the whole way through. It's a very different photography style than what George Lucas did, and that's okay, but it was just too much of that hand cam, shaky cam business. I didn't like it at all. So I did not like the photography, and I didn't like the photography choices really at all. I intensely disliked the music. This is, TV shows generally are not going to have very good music to them. That can be a difficult part of production to do within the time frame that you're required to do to produce a TV show. But this music was definitely on the extremely annoying side for me. It was full of just zing noises all over the place. Sparse, like piano stuff. It basically sounded like a guy just having to do it on like a sequencer program very quickly. Nothing memorable about the score whatsoever. It was just there to provide mood, and I think it worked in opposition to the mood in a lot of cases. It didn't fill in the gaps. Like if you have a big wide shot of landscape, usually you're going to expect something to kind of fill that in as far as audio. Really bad choices for the soundtrack. So the soundtrack is, I give it like a, 3 out of 10. It was bad. Right. I did not like the soundtrack at all. So the technical way that it was executed, I didn't really like. I mentioned the pacing. The pacing is, to me, agonizingly slow, even for a TV show. If you compare this to TV shows that I like most Star Trek TV shows, there's way more story that happens. in a 40-minute TV show than what is happening in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, I went and broke it down. There's virtually no story that happens, and there's really no conclusion of what's there. It's just an exposition of the character, and a very shallow and very slow one at that. Transitioning into the story stuff with the characters, we really have no idea anything about the Mandalorian by the end of this, other than he wears his helmet all the time. He has a voice that sounds pretty human, and I don't know what else. I guess he was taken in by the Mandalorians as a child. We learn nothing about the character other than he's a good guy. So they go out of their way to show that he's a good guy with that save the cat moment where he won't kill the baby Yoda, and where he actually saves the guy that he's actually trying to take in for a bounty. He doesn't kill anyone indiscriminately. He never attacks anyone. He never kills anyone in cold blood. This is not a neutral character. It's a good character, and that's all the real exposition that we get is his moral stance. Always he is responding to somebody attacking him when he draws his gun, and actually I think the director purposefully does this. So characters are always shooting at him, then he draws his pistol and shoots them. So he's always shooting second throughout the entire movie. He's always acting, he's always reactive and never proactive. And I talked about that with Han Solo, why Han shot first. If this was really a badass character or a nihilistic character or just an anti-hero, he'd be shooting first all the time. He's not a badass character. He's kind of a passive good guy that happens to be a bounty hunter. And so I didn't really like those combinations. I wanted them to just have like a full bore guy with guts instead of a guy who walks into situations where people try to kill him, miraculously doesn't die because like it hits his pauldron or something, and then is able to draw second and shoot. And they actually do this in a couple places. They knock down this final door at the end of the episode, and he's not holding a weapon when he walks into the enemy's bunker. And an enemy shoots at him, or he sees one, and then he draws and shoots. You know, so there's never a situation where he is acting aggressively. He's never proactive, really. And that's even with the like animals attacking him, he doesn't like kill the animals. You know, it's actually a very passive character, and I didn't really like the way he came off. Other characters I also didn't really like. So there's this blue-faced fish guy that they catch. He's super neurotic and very shaky and just talks like a person. And this is something that I get from Star Wars, and this is me judging Star Wars. You notice aliens very rarely sound like humans, because they don't have the same mouths, or they're talking a different language a lot of times, and you respond back in English. That's kind of the standard Star Wars stuff. Virtually never see an alien in the main 6 Star Wars movies that just talks like a normal person. The only exception, I'd say probably the main exception, is like the guy who owns the diner in Episode 2. Talks like a pretty normal dude overall. So this guy's he's like trying to be a comedic kind of character, and he's just came off very cringy. Didn't like him at all. I was happy when he got frozen in carbonite and got turned over. But at the same time, I wonder, like, why is this passive guy have a bounty out on him, and why is he out on an ice planet where he can't handle himself? It just seemed like a weird combination to put a character that was that much of a wuss into like Icewind Dale, basically, right? He's on Icewind Dale, but it's a planet. So there's that. They exposed the setting pretty nicely, so I like that. And the plot, I talked about the plot's very, very light. There's not a lot of plot events. The plot events take a long time to happen. Going back to the characters, the Mandalorian, he walks very stiffly. You know, there's a lot of shots of that. And because we have a mask on, we have no human expression coming out of him. In fact, there's very few human characters where there's any expression that you see. At the beginning, there's one like angry guy with a beard, but then you have an alien, you have the bartender, so you have a couple humans, you have the Mandalorian wearing a mask, and you have the fish face guy whose expressions are somewhat muted by the makeup. I mean, he's trying to act human. He interacts with humans to kind of collect the bounties and get the Carl Weathers, I guess maybe his handler in this movie. Then you have a droid, you have this alien that's wearing like a puppeteer mask. it looks very good, but it's not human. So there's a severe lack of human faces in the first episode. And having the character wear a mask all the time significantly puts up a barrier between you and understanding him. You can only really judge the actions. And so I think it's kind of a cheat to make people think that he's like a super impassive, unemotional guy when all his voice is emoting constantly, and he's acting in a way he's a reactive character, not a proactive masculine character, and he has that save the cat moment. He's a good guy, right? And so we'll see where they take that with episode 2 and 3. But I believe the entirety of episode 1 was to get you on the side of the Mandalorian and make you like him, and make him not necessarily a lovable character, but a character who seems morally correct in what he's doing. So I guess that's it. I mean, that's the Mandalorian. I know this is a very long analysis for you writers, but hopefully you'll be able to take from it what you will. It doesn't really make me a fan yet. I'll do more analysis of episode 2 and 3 if you guys want. What I will say is that I was a little bit disappointed by how quickly the fan base that was like F Disney just turned right around with one okay episode of TV. That was kind of eye-opening to me, because that says to me that the fan base for Star Wars is too loyal. They are loyal to the point where they will accept lots and lots of bad things as long as every so often there's something which is okay that they like. I don't really follow that, but that's what it is. People love Star Wars, and if you do a good thing of Star Wars, they are completely willing to forgive it. It also throws a monkey wrench into the idea that there was like Star Wars fatigue, right? People were not fatigued with Star Wars. They just didn't like the Star Wars that was being put out. And if you gave the fans something that they kind of liked, even something that really wasn't very good, which I don't think The Mandalorian's very good yet, they're going to be pretty happy with it, I guess. So people aren't ready to just jump off the Disney bandwagon yet. They'll continue to hope that Disney will fix Star Wars and make it good because they love Star Wars. So that's kind of a meta thing. Give me your thoughts about it and everything else down below in the comments section. And I'll see you guys next time. Don't forget, I do have a new book coming out here. It is called Eyes in the Walls. It's a straight horror book, so make sure you're on my mailing list, dvspress.com/list. I will be sending out advanced copies of this, and you can pre-order it for 99 cents on Amazon, and the paperback will be coming out a little bit before that. I also want to point you to a crowdfunding project for this black and white comic that Jesse White is doing. One of my stories, I wrote part of one of these comic stories, so some of my work is in it. Please check it out and maybe consider backing that. This is an extremely unique project, and I think it delivers something that is kind of missing from our culture right now in comics. So thanks so much, and I will see you guys next time.